Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. This is our third in a series with Vocab Malone, and for the sake of our viewers, if you have not watched the first two, you need to do that, because we talked about the history of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement, and then last time we talked about, what are the sort of the core ideas, the core doctrines, and this time we want to get into the question of how do they defend this stuff? I mean, all that stuff we just talked about, how do they articulate this from Scripture, and just if you were having a conversation or debate with one, what are they going to do? How do they defend what they believe?
I'll give you 5 classes of defense that they offer.
Categories.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll start with maybe smallest to greatest. So one way, and so this is the least way, but it can't be discounted that it's part of what they use, are angelic visitations or visions. Mm-hmm. So the 12 tribes of Israel
chart. That's pretty common with fringe movements, yeah.
Yeah, the 12 tribes of Israel chart and the Lashua and Kadash language are both supposed to be revealed to, most sources say, to Ariah, who was in charge of the One West School for a long time. Okay. Crowdy, of course, in 1892 had a vision. But one we haven't really talked about that not all the camps accept. This is one particular camp that would accept this. They're called the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ, but they're significant because it's where Ariah is still today. He's still alive. Okay. This camp, though, was the original school. They just changed their name. So the original school is now called the ICGJC. Mm-hmm. Ariah is there sort of as a figurehead. He's an older man, but the man in charge, he says, his name is Tazadakia, real name Jermaine Grant, says that on this trip to Israel that the school took, near the Mount Olive area, he had a vision that informed him that he was the, quote, God-sent comforter manifested physically. And so this sounds bizarre, obviously, someone saying they're essentially the physical manifestation of the Holy Spirit. Sure. But it makes sense within One Westism, because they teach reincarnation, and part of what they try to do during the school's heyday was to determine which one of their leaders were which figures of old.
Like Dalai Lama kind of stuff, which one's the next one.
Ariah was John the Revelator. A man named Mashah was King David and Moses. Tahar was rumored to be Paul. And so, they kind of took up a lot of the best characters. Well, later on, Tazadakia says, no one's got the Holy Spirit, though.
Right, yeah.
And so his critics call him comfy, but the members in the school don't call that. They'll say the God-sent comforter. But that's who he claimed to be. So only one camp accepts that, but that shows you the importance of vision. And one more, when the school, which again, everyone must remember, this is the main school, just under a different name, that's why it gets confusing, was doing these different doctrinal changes, such as Jermaine Grant is actually the God-sent comforter. Ariah says that before his father, who was also involved with the Commandment Keepers in the beginning of the One West School, his name is Yaquab, real name Peter Sherrod. Ariah says before his father died, he received a visit from an angel, and the angel told him that a lot of the doctrine of the original school was wrong. So this was used as a way to justify some of the changes that were going on. But it's sort of retconning to the nerds in the audience who know that term. It was total retcon because Yaquab was already dead. So Ariah is saying this angelic visitation happened at this time. And so you see how it happens. Now, not all the leaders resort to this, okay? But it's significant within the school of One West that enough of it has happened.
So that's sort of the... We can't say least important, but that's on the low end of the defense.
It's the least frequent. I'll say that. I've run into one particular Hebrew Israelite who does say that an angel appeared to him in the sky, and he had an afro, and all he did was smile at him. And the man says that he took that as confirmation to let him know he was an Israelite. The angel was smiling at him. Right. But this was just one personal guy I knew.
So how else do they defend their system?
Internal subjectivism. So related to the person, basically a sense or a feeling.
This is the identity thing that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, it's almost like someone will say, the day I discovered or heard I was an Israelite, I always knew.
So it's kind of like the Mormon burning in the bosom sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes they use the word actually vibration. They'll say, I could tell by the vibration. And sometimes they do this also to determine who was not an Israelite, this internal subjectivism. They'll say, that man's vibration is all wrong. There's no way he's a Jake. Now, a Jake means an Israelite who's not awakened yet to their status as an Israelite. Because before Israel was named Israel, he was named Jacob.
Yeah.
So Jake is sort of their religious slang for that. So they justify this for the test the spirits verse in 1 Thessalonians, and also the spirit being subject to the spirit of the prophets in 1 Corinthians. That's how they use that. But they might say something like, you could tell by his vibration he's a Hamite. And that's significant because on their theology, Hamites look like them but aren't them. They're another people. So they believe Africans who are Hamites will be in bondage to them in the kingdom.
It's a very convenient way to distance yourself or embrace, depending on what direction you want to go.
Yeah, so that internal subjectivism is a key thing. And they even do this to their opponents. So they might say the reason these two Edomites are sitting on this couch is because they know their time is short. And Esau is trying to fight against this, but they know they're Edomites. So they actually use the internal subjectivism even projecting on others.
Right. It's just not. They're internally subjectivizing someone else's internal subjectivism.
Yeah.
Okay, and that makes perfect.
You're getting it. You're getting it.
Yeah. All right. So what else?
Perceived authorities. So if you're in a camp, these men are prophets. They call them elder and apostles.
Sure.
GMS always opens up every video saying double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. So the perceived authorities within the camp, but also some transcend camps, meaning people who are considered important, or works that are considered important by all people.
How do they get that status? Is that also visionary, or is that attributed to them by the community?
Well, every now and then you'll see someone who picks up a little bit of real Hebrew knowledge, and they can teach basic Hebrew grammar, and they like to do. Sometimes they start doing gematria.
Is this real Hebrew or their version of Hebrew, or both?
It's weird. What happens? What I've seen is when one Westers learn real Hebrew, which is kind of rare, which is really, really rare. They're discouraged to do it. They kind of become ambivalent about Lashon Kadash, and so they have a weird relationship with their own roots. But non-One West Hebrew Israelites who aren't attached to Lashon Kadash, sometimes they do learn Hebrew.
Okay.
And when they do that, they like to do gematria. So sometimes they become authorities because of some of their Hebrew knowledge.
For the sake of our viewers, gematria is just quick
assigning. You're probably better at it than I am.
Well, it's
assigning numbers to the characters and getting hidden meanings out of it.
Yeah, numerical value to letters and doing the math.
Yeah. So sometimes there's a guy who I respect. So he'll probably watch this. This is not shade to him. Like I don't agree with some of his practice, how he gets there, but I respect him as a man, and I respect a lot of what he does. His name is Zion Lex, and I've had friendly conversation with him. He knows a lot of information. Like he's if you wanted to watch an able apologist for Hebrew Israelism, some of the things I'm talking about, even though they're more common on the street, they're not necessarily the best Hebrew Islam has to offer. Someone like Zion Lex would be someone who would be more formidable. You watch it like, oh, he's making some good points there, and again, doesn't mean his religion's right. But
means he's a little more attached to data that are real.
He is, and so again, I mean, I'll give Zion Lex. I don't mind giving Zion Lex a shout out. Like if you watch him, you say, okay, because sometimes if you see a guy like that, a lot of what I'm saying won't seem to apply because you're like, well, this is not what vocab was talking about. I'm talking about the common man on the street. He was like the guy at your job,
the guy you're going to run into the street.
Like that. But you do sometimes see that. So they become authorities when they do that. But books as well, not just people living right now, even though this author is still alive, Rudolph Windsor, this is sort of the book of the book, because what it does is offers them an entirely different alternative history that props up their understanding of how they got where they got, and different things like that. But the book itself is not well sourced at all. Just I'll show you a leap in logic first.
Okay.
And if this is too much, cut it out or something like that.
It's not that we've not seen any of those already.
Right. So they're talking about ancient black civilization, chapter 1 in this book. It's called From Babylon to Timbuktu, by the way, by Rudolph Windsor. This area was also the location of the Garden of Eden, and the people of this region were jet black. So he's talking about the original folks being black. And it's such a weird thing to use the jet black. It's odd.
Yeah.
Turn the page. Because the Garden of Eden is associated with the land of Ethiopia, we can conclude that the people were black. So let me read that again. Because the Garden of Eden is associated with the land of Ethiopia, we can conclude that the people were black. So there's numerous problems in just that tiny little sentence. Well, the whole book is like that. Like I've got all the little places of the list.
I'm still stuck on how you get Eden associated with Ethiopia.
But they do it. I think he does it with the rivers. Page 23. Because the colored people of the world are in a majority, it is proper to infer that the whites have always been a minority and that the black people are the original people of humanity. So the main problem, I think, there's the last sentence, that the idea that the black people are the original people of humanity, and it's weird how he gets there. I'm going to read one more from page 25.
Sure.
Therefore, the leprosy that Naaman had will cleave unto you and unto your seed descendants forever. And he departed from his presence a leper as white as snow. This type of leprosy affected the reproductive organs, genes, and chromosomes that determine hereditary characteristics in his body. And I'll show you who's talking about here in a second. This meant all his children would produce white offspring, even though he was a black man at first. This was the curse of Gehazi. I always mispronounce it. Gehazi. Yeah. So basically, lepers equals whites. They're accounting for the origin of white people.
Right.
So that's how he does it. Now, not all Israelites do that, but that is a really common move.
Sure, yeah.
But I mean, just that sentence is incredibly tortured.
Well, that's being kind.
The whole book is like that. Okay. And it doesn't source. There's a place where he literally says, the Bible dictionary says. It actually says, the Bible dictionary. Okay. What? Smith's, Easton's, Cambridge? So the Bible
There's
dictionary?
There's only 50 or 60 of those.
So that's the way the book is sourced. But they'll read it publicly. They'll hold it up. And, they just give Windsor a pass.
Yeah, I won't even ask if they get into like peer-reviewed journal literature, because that seems kind of obvious.
No, but there's a guy who's claiming he's going to do that. So I'll name drop him too. He'll take this segment and put it. Divine Prospect, I don't really like calling him that. It's a little strange. But Ron Shields, but I know he calls himself Divine Prospect. I don't mean this disrespect to want to call him Ron Shields.
Yeah, anyways. I'm betting I know what journals he's going to pick already, because there are there are a couple that were created just to reinforce like the Afrocentric view.
Really?
Yes. There are a couple of journals that exist only to perpetuate that idea.
Wow.
And in other words, they have the veneer of scholarship and peer review, but basically the only people that review the articles are people who already, adopt that idea.
Well, I didn't know that exactly.
I want
to hear more about this.
Right, when it comes out, just shoot it to me, and I'll let you know. I'll let you know if my intuition is correct.
Stuff like that is why what we in the field, like my friend Adam Coleman uses the term a lot. I don't know who invented it, but pseudo scholarship.
Yeah.
It has the appearance or veneer in some way. But honestly, when you read this, I don't even think it has.
This doesn't even rise to that level.
They would, to them it does. But now again, we got to keep in mind, any movement grows over time, and we've seen them become more sophisticated, nuanced.
Yeah,
so if I do this interview 5 years from now, some of it, they might be more sophisticated by then.
So what are I think we covered 3.
Two more left.
2 more.
Second category, or we're going 5 from to 1, are what they call the color passages.
Okay.
These are scriptures that they believe describe Israelites as black peoples.
All right.
And so the big one is with Jesus, whom most of them, when we're talking about one Westerners, call Yahweh, Revelation 1:14 through 15. Revelation 1:14 through 15. And they zoom in on the idea of where it says that Jesus' hair was white like wool. They kind of morph that into
the Ancient of Days imagery from Daniel 7.
Yeah, they'll go back to Daniel 7 and they use that with Revelation, and basically they say Jesus had woolly hair. What people on earth have woolly hair? The so-called black man. And they'll say his feet were burned like bronze or brass. They'll say, what color is something when it gets burnt? I'll say black. So if his feet are black, what color is the rest of his body?
Right, even though it doesn't say black.
It doesn't.
Right.
The passage is describing the majesty and glory and even indeed deity of heavenly Jesus, not the ethnicity of earthly Jesus. Right. The whole passage is basically a glowing man. If you read it from start to finish, and his feet are glowing is what's happening.
And that's stock description of supernatural beings, just across the board in antiquity.
But they do a thing where they say, well, if something's burnt, it's black.
Right. Even though Hebrew has a word for black that isn't the word for burnished bronze. Okay.
Well, so there in the Greek, in the Greek with the Revelation passage, the sense of the word is like that they're my understanding of the sense is not that they have been burned. It's like some completed process. It's like they're in the process of burning along those lines. But
Right.
but
I'm just thinking of Daniel, not the Revelation stuff.
the Daniel 7:9.
I'm thinking of the source text. But what's the other?
Jeremiah 14:2,
Okay.
we looked at before the show, is another one. Although one camp, Sakari, is getting away from that because they're even realizing
This
how
is
bad
the one
it
where
is.
it kind of depends on the translation too, if I recall.
King James uses an old understanding of the word black. I got it right here, actually. So if you look, there's a dictionary from 1755, Samuel Johnson and John Walker,
Okay.
Dictionary of the English Language. And what it says is here that the word black, this is under the entry for black, can mean of the color of night, dark, cloudy of countenance, sullen, horrible, wicked, dismal, mournful.
Right. And so what does Jeremiah 14:2 say?
Black unto the ground is what it says, but
Yeah,
they're using
black
it.
unto the ground.
Yeah, they're using it in the sense of mourning into the ground. And if you look at most translations now, they'll say something like that. Well,
Like,
they say
like
mourning.
they're bowed in mourning.
Yeah,
right,
it's not the color of Judah's skin.
They're bowing in grief, toward the ground. Okay.
In the Hebrew,
And the King James uses the word black there because of this dictionary.
right,
Okay.
it's a verb, not an adjective. The actual Hebrew, I don't know if the word there, I don't, but that's the word that's in the text.
Kadru
Yeah.
is what I'm looking at.
It's
there.
a verb.
Yeah.
It's not an adjective.
That's interesting.
So the black into the ground, it fails at the Hebrew level too.
It describes an activity, not a quality. Is
Right.
what you're getting at. Yeah.
So one of the camps, Sakari, who is, I think you can describe them safely as a radical One West camp. They do the whole boot kissing thing. We haven't even talked about that, but that's where they have people bow down to them and kiss their shoes
Okay.
in compliance with passages that, or what sometimes scholars call the submission motif of, lick the dust and all that.
Right.
Sakari engages that heavily, and yet they're even getting away from this argument. They're no longer employing it. So some of the One West camps are realizing this is not a great argument after all. But
Right.
we'll
So
see.
what's the remaining category?
So here's the big one. Prophetic characteristic passages. I don't know what to call them. Maybe you can help me
Yeah.
come up with a different
Okay.
name. But they're passages that they would say describe the character or traits, not physically, something else about them, of the true Jews, of Israelites.
Okay.
Conditions they might be in. And the big one I mentioned at the end of the last show is Deuteronomy 28. That is what we call the locus classicus of Hebrew Israelism.
All right,
It's
so
Deuteronomy 28.
Do you have any part of that to quote?
Well, the big verse out of Deuteronomy 28 is verse 68.
Okay.
And of course, you more than well know this. It's essentially stock for a treaty, the covenant
Sure,
treaties.
Yeah.
And so
Blessings and cursings and witnesses and all that stuff.
they're not even using the passage in the right way. They're looking at it as like it's some kind of prophetic thing of here's what's going to happen. But it's more just like if you don't do this, here's what will happen. They use it in a strange way. I don't think they're justified in their use of it.
Okay.
Verse 68 says this, though. The Lord will take you back in ships to Egypt by a route that I said you would never see again. There you will sell yourselves to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. Now I'm using the Christian Standard Bible. I usually use the ESV, but this fit in my bag better.
Okay.
They use the KJV because one part it says, not that you will sell yourselves, but you will be sold. But let me show you how they use this passage,
Okay.
Dr. Heiser.
All right.
The Lord will take you back in ships to Egypt. They'll say those are slave ships. So the ships
Sure.
are literal, and a lot of times they'll just act like the passage says
Right.
slave
and
ships.
so God is basically saying, hey, I delivered you from Egypt, but if you violate the terms of the covenant, I'm going to put you on ships and take you right back.
But they say Egypt means house of bondage,
Okay.
not literal Egypt. Now, as a response, I sometimes show them verse 60, and I also show them verse 27. The Lord will afflict you with the boils of Egypt, verse 60. He will afflict you again with all the diseases of Egypt, meaning the other two times you have
plagues,
Egypt there.
yeah.
It's actually the space of land
Right.
that happened in Egypt.
And in Hebrew, it'd be the same word anyway.
But here, it means house of bondage. What it means is the Lord's going to take you back in slave ships into slavery. So the
Okay.
ships are literal, but the Egypt is metaphorical or
Okay.
symbolic.
Okay. So,
So-
they're splitting the verse into metaphorical and literal parts.
I call it
Okay.
Hebrew hopscotch.
Okay.
So then by a route it said you would never see again. So the idea of going back, you can't go back to a place you've never been. Israelites can't go back to the Western Hemisphere or back to the United States or back to Brazil because they've never been there.
Right.
It makes sense if you're saying back to Egypt because they had been there.
Right.
They're saying what just means back into slavery. They fall
Yeah,
back on that
yeah. So
defense again.
so that the metaphorical part there is really important to them.
Yes. There you will sell yourselves to your enemies as male and female slaves. No one will buy you. You're destitute, indentured servant, don't have anything else to offer, get out of debt,
Yeah.
offer yourself. It's going to be so bad, though, no one will even want to buy your services. That makes sense. They say you'll be sold, so they use the KJV there.
Sure.
And then the key, though, is what they do with this. No one will buy you. They say, buy can me redeem. And what it means is no one will save us out of our condition.
Okay.
So not buy. Even though you have sell, it makes sense that you have
Right,
buy. They say
right.
it's sell and redeem.
Right.
And redeem is to save you from your condition.
Right. So now they're basically just altering the vocabulary there.
Yeah, so 68 is important, but it's not the only verse that's important. They'll go through all this, and they'll say, who owns the stores in our neighborhoods and stuff. And I mean, if there's anything to credit some version of even One West Hebrewism is, when you talk about having an entrepreneurial spirit, some of the camps are getting into that. These are things that I would say are good things. Now, it's just you don't have to use bad doctrine to get there.
Right.
But there's some good points. All borrowing, and instead it's better to be the lender, not the borrower. You go through these things in health, because this is all related to the verse. But there's questions to ask them, and I don't know. We might do that more when we critique them.
We'll have you back, and we can critique. Sort of evaluate. What's going on here. But yeah, that was good. But this last one is sort of the most fundamental kind of. Maybe not. Maybe it is a fundamental.
It's their John 3:16.
Okay.
It's their John 3:16.
All right, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Then. All right. Well, thanks for being with us again.
I'm glad to be here, Dr. Iser.
And thank you for watching Fringe Pop 321 again. Please visit our website, fringepop321.com, for information about the content of this episode and other episodes. And if you're interested in supporting us, what we do here at Fringe Pop, go to fp321.com/S, as in the letter S, and support us. And come back and watch more episodes, because what you know may not be so.